All right. Welcome in, everyone. You guys sent in some really fascinating stuff about anxiety this week, and we're going to try to take a deep dive into it today. The goal is to sort of pull out the most important points, like what it feels like and how it's different from stress and what kind of impact it can have. And then most importantly, what can we actually do about it? And looking at what you sent, I mean, there's definitions and personal stories and advice. So let's unpack this and see what we find.
It's really interesting how anxiety can be so many different things. Like your sources show, it's almost like for some people it's, this constant thing always there in the background, but then for others it's more like it's triggered by something specific. It really shows how different it can be for everyone.
Yeah, and getting into what it feels like. Um, your material gets pretty specific. Like physically, we see things like a racing heart, or maybe you're
Yeah.
not breathing deeply enough or even feeling dizzy. And then mentally, it's like your mind won't stop and you just keep thinking about bad things that could happen. Like your body's in that fight or flight mode, even though there's no real danger.
And the thing is, the triggers for all this, they can be almost anything. It doesn't have to be some big life event. It might
Yeah.
be just meeting someone new or having to make a phone call.
For real.
Yeah.
It really makes you think. So, like, what about for you? Which of those descriptions, the constant feeling or the triggered episodes or the physical stuff or the mental stuff, like which of those clicks for you the most?
It's definitely something to think about as we go deeper into this. Now, something you sent in also talks about the difference between anxiety and stress. And we hear those two words together a lot, right? So what's the difference?
Well, the way I see it is stress is usually about something specific that's happening outside of us. Like you have a deadline at work or you have to go to some big event. And usually when that thing is over, the stress goes away too.
Yeah. But with anxiety, it can be different. Like it might not even have a clear trigger and it can stick around even after a stressful thing has ended. What's interesting is how anxiety often makes people worry about the future, always thinking about what might go wrong.
It's almost like you're carrying around the weight of all these problems that haven't even happened yet. Exhausting. So for you, is it more like that temporary stress tied to a specific event, or is it more of that constant worry about the future?
That's a really key difference. And it helps us understand how anxiety can impact everyday life, because your sources talk about this ripple effect that anxiety can have, and it can be pretty big.
Yeah, they talk about what they call avoidance behaviors, right? Or maybe you start skipping out on things like parties, or you avoid talking to people, or maybe even put off doing important stuff just to avoid those anxious feelings.
And the tricky thing is, if you keep avoiding those situations, you never really learn how to deal with them. So, in a way, the anxiety might even get worse the next time because you haven't developed those coping
Yeah,
skills.
it's like a trap. You avoid it because you're anxious, and then because you avoid it, you get more anxious the next time.
Yeah.
And so then anxiety starts to control your life, right? Not just how you feel, but what you actually do. Have you ever seen yourself doing those avoidance things? And how do you think that connects to your anxiety?
Really good question. And the stuff you sent in also includes this personal story, which I think is super helpful for people trying to understand their own anxiety.
It's about someone who had anxiety from when they were a teenager all the way into being an adult.
Hmm.
And they describe it as this feeling of unease that wouldn't go away,
Hmm.
like carrying around a heavy weight and never being able to really relax.
What's powerful is how they talk about worrying about all these different things like work and relationships and health. It really shows how anxiety can affect so many parts of your life.
And the good thing is they talk about reaching out for help. It's like
Uh,
they realized that they didn't just have to live with it,
Mm.
that they could learn to manage it.
Right. And I think that shows that no one has to go through this alone. So many people struggle with these same things. Just knowing that can be a big help. Now, let's move on to something super important. What can we actually do about anxiety? Your sources actually have some great tips.
Let's get into it. So first up, we have something that might seem really simple, but it can actually be incredibly effective. Deep breathing. You even send a specific technique. Breathe in deeply for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then exhale slowly for 6 seconds. So why does this work?
Well, the cool thing is that that slow exhale actually triggers your body's natural relaxation system, like hitting a reset button on your stress response. It can really help with things like a racing heart.
Makes sense. And then we have these grounding techniques. And you gave us the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. How does that help?
It's all about bringing your attention to the present moment. Because when you're anxious, your mind often gets stuck in the past or worries about the future, right? So by noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste, You're bringing yourself back to the here and now, and that can really help to stop those racing thoughts.
It's like you're giving your brain a new job to do, something very specific and real to focus on. Now, you also sent some stuff about CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. What's the main idea behind that?
So CBT is about recognizing that your thoughts, feelings, and actions are all connected. It helps you figure out those negative thoughts that are making you anxious and then teaches you how to challenge them. Like, let's say you keep thinking, I'm going to fail. CBT helps you look at that thought and say, well, wait a minute, I've done this before. I can do this again.
So you're sort of retraining your brain, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And then there's exercise, which is always good for you, but how does it help with anxiety specifically?
Well, exercise helps release tension, all that built up energy. Plus, it releases endorphins, which are those natural mood boosters. So it can really help balance things out in your brain. It doesn't even have to be some crazy workout. Even a walk can make a difference.
Right. And finally, there's the thing about stimulants like caffeine and nicotine and sugar. So how do those affect anxiety?
The thing is, those can actually cause some of the same physical symptoms as anxiety, like your heart rate might go up or you might feel restless or agitated. So if you already have anxiety, cutting back on those things can really help.
So you listening at home, which of these things, breathing or the grounding or the CBT or the exercise or the stimulants, like which of those stands out to you the most right now?
It's something to really think about. Now, even though all these things can really help, sometimes they might not be enough. And your sources actually talk about that too. Like, when might it be time to seek professional help for anxiety?
Yeah. And it's good to remember that asking for help is never a bad thing. If anxiety is really affecting your life, like your relationships or work or school or just your overall happiness, then talking to a therapist or counselor is a great idea.
Because they can help you figure out what's causing your anxiety and create a plan that's specifically for you. And sometimes medication might also be helpful, like your sources mentioned.
What's important is to remember that reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness, right?
Hmm.
It means you're taking care of yourself. So if you're listening and anxiety is really bothering you, definitely think about finding some professional support. It's out there.
Absolutely. It's all about getting the tools you need to feel better. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just to recap, I think the big takeaway is that anxiety is a real thing, right? And it's not the same as everyday stress. It can really affect how we live our lives. But the good news is there are things we can do about it, like those techniques we discussed. And if it's really bad, there's professional help out there.
Really well put. So as you think about everything we've talked about, what's one small step you could take today to understand or deal with your own anxiety? Maybe try that deep breathing exercise, or think about what triggers your anxiety, or even just take a minute to acknowledge how anxiety is affecting you. Sometimes just starting small can make a big difference.
Great stuff. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.
See you then.